All right, I think we're on time. So thanks everyone very much for coming in. This is the Tools of the Trade panel discussion. My name is Chris Watson. I'm going to be the moderator today. Do a quick background on myself and then introduce our two panelists. I've got a number of questions for them, and then we also want to make sure that we are opening up questions from you guys. So just by way of background, I've been a writer for about 25 years for corporations, nonprofits. I have done extensive blogging. One of them is called 150 Steps, an Adoption Journey. That's about the multi-year journey that my wife and I were on as we were adopting. I've also started doing podcasting, as many of us might have done during the pandemic when we were stuck at home and needed to talk to somebody. I'm currently querying my first full-length novel. It's a fantasy novel, so I'm trying to go the trad publishing route there, while also working on a contemporary mystery that is set up in Maine. I'd like to introduce two panelists, Rob Bentley and Peter O'Donnell. So Rob, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Rob Bentley. I wrote Where Readers Dare, and I'm working on the sequel right now. As you can see, I'm typing away on that. And so I started writing back before social media was a thing back in the 80s, and finally got into publishing, or at least finally got back into writing during NaNoWriMo in 2004, and then found Aria a couple of years later, and then decided to dust something off, and it took me about 8 years to write Weaver. As you can see, I finally got there. And I'm currently the social media director for Association of Rhino Authors.
My name's Peter O'Donnell. Usually it's Peter O'Donnell, but I found out there's a really famous author named Peter O'Donnell and wrote a series called Modesty Blaze, which was like a 007 novel. So I cut the R off my name and added an A. In my day job, I'm a firefighter, but my background is in journalism. That's what my degree's in. I've been writing since I was a kid. Short stories started there. The first book that I published was called The Curse of Purgatory Cove, which is a middle-grade story about a paperboy that meets an old man claiming to be a pirate. It took me about 15 years doing rewrites to get that book to where I was comfortable bringing it out. My second and third book are two books in a series called In the Giant Shadow, which are science fiction stories. It's going to be a 7-book series when it's all said and done. And yes, the different volumes are actually outlined, and I know where I'm going with it. So the third one in that series is actually already in first draft. And then I decided to become an illustrator. Well, there was a long path to that. But I wrote a book and did the illustrations for it about my day job as a firefighter. I also have a podcast called Ill-Advised Stories, which were a number of short stories that I had written for my kids that I recorded, added some sound effects. I had my daughters playing the characters and brought in other people, such as my German in-laws, and all had fun doing that before the pandemic. So it's been a little while since I've updated it, but we've had a good time.
Great. Well, thanks guys for joining me today. So as we know, the title of this panel is Tools of the Trade, and wanted to talk about not just how people write, but sort of what the tools, what the applications are, what the mechanisms are by which we're able to get things written. Prior to the start of today's panel, I was just jotting down sort of different stages, different actions that writers might take that could tap into different types of tools, applications, things like that. Simple things like note-taking, plotting, drafting and writing, reviewing, whether or not it's you reviewing your own things or having your beta readers review, creating audiobooks or podcasting. How do you self-publish? What are the tools that are out there? If you're working on, say, a fantasy or a sci-fi novel that's in a different world, how do you craft maps to know where things are to help you stay organized? Story and character Bibles. Making sure that you remember that the character that you said was a redhead in chapter 1 is still a redhead in chapter 30 because you hadn't forgotten to put them in as a blonde. Doing just revisions or illustrating. So with that sort of stuff in mind, I've got a couple of questions I want to throw to Pete and to Rob to get started. What is your sort of go-to tool for actual writing? You're actually sitting down to put words on paper. What do you guys use as sort of your standard? Rob?
My standard would be Word, because I've been using it for long enough. I started off using AppleWorks back when it actually existed, and when Apple wasn't a Mac, and so went from AppleWorks to Word, and then Scrivener, went back to Word. I'm generally a pantser, so Scrivener is for anyone out there looking to get anything like Scrivener, to keep all your notes in one place is probably the best thing to do. Word is a little bit, wieldy with multiple documents, but I generally use Word.
I'm a big fan of Word as well. That's the program I learned on, and I wish I could get into Scriveners and learn all that stuff. But one of the things that you do when you decide to do this on your own, bring it out into self-publishing, is you're learning so many different kinds of technology, and sometimes you have to pick and choose the ones that you're willing to learn. Things like building a website and whatnot have dominated my brain over as far as learning technology. So I have not dived into Scriveners, but we were just having a conversation about it earlier, and the way in which Rob was describing it, to where you can use a pinboard to keep track of things. I would be still in Word to where I'm multiple files, and then the worst thing is that when I go to work on the next volume of the series, I print up all my notes, actually hard paper print them up from like 10, 15 years ago on this series, which is like, that didn't happen, I changed that, and then I wind up actually, I guess I'm the opposite of technology, because I actually have a pen and I'm crossing stuff out as I go, which is a complete waste of time and effort. And if I ever learn Scrivener, I bet you it would probably benefit me. So.
To this one, give you an idea, because I pants so much, and generally what happens is I create documents in Word and then put them into a folder, and I figure my hierarchy is fine. It's really bad when you have to screenshot what you have open in Word to make sure you reopen it later and don't lose it. So if anyone is pantsing and is looking for something that will keep everything in line, or at least keep everything nice and formatted for you, anything that has any sort of corkboard or anything that has a drawer, I guess Scrivener is the drawer. There's also Atticus as well, which I haven't really played around with that much, so I can't speak for it. But Scrivener has a lovely thing where you can just move chapters around, dragging it off. And it's wonderful, because in Word you have to copy paste and move everything around. But anything with any application with a drawer involved, where you can put multiple documents into one, is a godsend for anyone who's out there who has had files everywhere, like Pete just said. It's everywhere. You want to make sure it's all in one place where you can find it, instead of, like he just said, just making sure one character is still read and not blown at the end.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I've found that Scrivener's been my go-to, just because I tend to write, I'll have an idea for a scene, and I'll write down the scene, and I'm not entirely sure where it's going to go. That way I can just be reorganizing scenes. It's great for research. But then there's the whole spectrum. In an earlier session, someone was mentioning Google Docs is another way of doing it. You get that whole spectrum, from what Spock called stone knives and bearskins, and with pen and paper, all the way up through really complicated but very powerful applications. What do you guys put the most value on as you're preparing to write? What's most important to you when you're considering how you're going to write?
I would say, as long as my workflow isn't interrupted. To give you a brief little example, Photoshop changed up things recently within the last year, where my workflow changed so much I had to go onto the Photoshop board and like, okay, how do I fix this? Because my workflow was completely shot, because they changed something, and they changed enough where I need to find it. But workflow, any sort of application where my workflow goes through, I can open it up and just start typing. And that's, as long as I can start typing without having to go through checkboxes and things like that, then that's generally what I look for.
I agree, yeah. So the sooner I can get it. So I'm a visual person. I have a tendency to think in scenes, to think in imagery. So oftentimes I'll start wide, like imagining, as I'm plotting a novel, as I'm working on the outside of it, there's certain things that I want to hit in there, certain moments that I want to capture. And you don't necessarily know within the plot where you're going to get to that. So that's why I'm kind of excited about the idea of scripters for this fact, because you can capture that scene, hold on to that scene, and it's not, you're not going to have to be diving through files to find. So I really need to get more organized, basically, when it comes to that. I probably can learn from you guys. But that's probably to hold on to those moments. And sometimes even for me, like I sketch a little bit, so that way visually I'll know what the... So especially with the science fiction series, I wanted to know what the characters look like. I wanted to know what the scenes look like. So I'll actually do sketches and little drawings of them to keep track of what I was doing.
What about at sort of different stages, whether you're plotting, writing, do you find your tools change depending on what it is what stage you're at with the writing that you're doing?
I tend to keep the tools the same because what happens is that if I go from, so say I would write in the morning and then edit at night, and so as long as the tools change, as long as the tools are the same, and as long as the grammar check and the spell check is still the same, then it's my workflow continues. So it's like I don't really change applications that much because if I did, I'd be everywhere. I mean, the only time I change applications would be when I go from it's finished, it's edited to publication. So that would be the only time things would change.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't want to jump horses. I want to stick with the thing that I know that it works. And it drives me nuts when they update and change it.
As long as they update it for the good, it's fine. When
No,
they start,
we don't need updates. It was perfect in 1996. Leave it alone.
What about mobility? The ability to not just be tied to your desk, but if you have an idea and you want to sit down and caption ideas or wherever you are.
Great question, because I have the iPad here in front of me. So really any sort of writing application, if you have, say, I have a laptop, I also have a tablet as well. So I've actually paid for Word as well as paid for, say, Scrivener as well on the iPad. And to give you a real quick thing, a couple years back, I'd gone on a cruise and laptops were being scanned and stuff like that, so I didn't want to bring a laptop, so I brought my iPad with a tablet or with a keyboard, a foldable keyboard. And I had Scrivener on there and I had Word on there as well, and everything got saved up to the cloud anyway. And so being able to have something mobile is great to have, because you can then go directly back into it, go directly into the application, and start typing away on the keyboard, and nothing changes. So it's really easy to do so.
I really think they put me on this panel as the example of what not to do. Because I recently traveled down to Charlotte, where I went to school, and I had finished the first draft of the first book in the series, and as the laptop's going through yet another X-ray machine, my friends are like, "Are you out of your mind? That's where everything is. Why don't you put it on the cloud?" I was like, "You're right, I should do that," and then I didn't do it. But it's so I need to learn to do things like that. Now on the iPad as well, a lot of the illustrations that are in here, they're just in that file. They're just in the Procreate file. So I definitely am very bad about this. So, and I'll work on it. I feel like I'm going to church.
You won't, kids. You won't. We'll be back next year. So, Pete, how's it going? Well.
So like right now, I'm working on a rewrite on a very old. Well, it's not that. It's maybe 10 years old. And I'm working on a rewrite on it, and the computer crashed right in the middle of it. Of course, it's frustrating when you're writing a first draft and you lose something. It is frustrating. But you're more than likely going to be able to rewrite it because you know where you work. But when you're doing a rewrite, to where you're going in each paragraph and you're changing, you're making little tweaks here, little tweaks there, and I rewrote that sentence and that sentence there, and then it crashes, and you don't know what you fixed. That is certainly one of the most frustrating experiences you can have with a laptop.
It only has to happen once to you. And once it happens once to you, you're going, okay, I'm going to get up the USB stick, plug everything in, stack it up 3 times, and
Yeah.
I'm going to show my age. When I was in high school, writing a paper, and it was on a Commodore 64 with a tape drive.
Wow.
And oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like 5 1/4 we're talking?
3 5 1/4.
We're talking audio.
Yeah, you guys are deep now.
Oh yeah.
Deep cut.
This is a real deep cut. And my foot hit the extension cord, I hadn't saved. Sunday night, it was a 15-page paper that was due. I had to rewrite it all. I didn't go bowling with my family, so back up your stuff. That's the message there. I've found that for me, certainly the mobility, I mentioned Scrivener because I've got it on my iMac at home, I've got it on my iPad, I've got it on my phone, but I've also found that the actual physical tools vary for me. Like I wrote the bulk of the novel that I'm currently querying almost entirely on the iPad, with the keyboard and Scrivener. But I found that it was not a good tool for when I wanted to go in and do revision. Because I wanted to have the bigger screen. There are additional features like being able to do snapshots where before you start making edits to a chapter, you can snapshot it so that original version is saved. Then you can go in and you can make changes. So I did most of the revisioning on the bigger screen, just because of some of the additional features. But I love being able to, if I'm standing in line at the grocery store and I have an idea, or I see an interesting person walking by and I want to remember that image, I can take that picture and I can just upload it right off of my phone, right into my manuscript, into a folder there. So it's the ability to have that cloud and then have it be wherever I get to is I found very, very helpful. What about other tools that you guys use? I mean, for example, Pete, you're doing podcasts, you've got your website, you've got your illustrations, stuff that's going on web. What other tools are you using? You mentioned Procreate.
Yeah, so Procreate is what I use to do my illustrations on. So for years, I'm not by any means a traditionally trained artist, but I'm somebody that enjoyed drawing, and then I had children, and I got to draw with them, and then I slowly got better at it. And I had started the podcast, which was all children's stories for them. And this particular story that came out of that was going to be one of the stories, and I decided I wanted it. The images were so clear in my head that I wanted it to be a picture book. And I spent 3 years trying to get better at what I was doing. And the tool that really kind of accelerated that was Procreate, because I'll show you guys. Procreate is a really great program to where, when you draw on it, it's like drawing on paper. I mean, you have the pen and the images just come out perfect. But the nice thing about it is you can change it as you go, and you can, here's the Louvre in Paris, the illustration for the characters and whatnot. And as you work on the different layers, you can change things, and you're not stuck with, when you're working with, so my first book, The Curse of Purgatory Code, there are illustrations in that as well, but they're all done with ink and paper. And if you make a mistake, you're basically starting over, especially once you're in the ink stage. So I don't know how many of you guys draw, but usually the way you work is you start out with a pencil, or at least this is the way I do it, is I start out with a blue pencil, and you're very sketchy, you're very light, you're very slow into that. And then if you make a mistake at that stage, it's not a big deal. But once you get to the pen part of it, if you make a mistake, then you're starting over. So the nice thing about the Procreate is that if something's a little sketchy, if something's a little out of focus, or it's not a scale to it, you can just move it around. You can constantly change things right up until the time the art is printed. And that's, I think, coming off of that, for a $10 program, so the iPad itself, I think, is, I forget exactly what that is, but the program itself, compared to what does Photoshop cost?
Photoshop's actually a monthly fee now.
Yeah, so Procreate is $10, and then you own it for life. It's on your iPad for life. And I personally feel like this is a little bit of time that I've spent playing with Photoshop. I like that better.
What about for podcasting?
So for podcasting, that was a learning stage because I had the vision of what I wanted it to be, what I wanted the program to be to start with. Have it basically sound like an old radio drama. And then the one thing that I learned is don't cheap out on a microphone. Like whatever you do, get a good microphone, because you're going to put so much work into the editing of the podcast, going back and listening to your own voice over and over again, which is a whole thing to get used to. You're going to put so much work into it, but if you don't have that initial good sound quality, it's just, it's not ever going to sound. And you really don't want to have to go back. So when you're doing a podcast where you're having a conversation, it's not as bad, I think, because it's not mine was scripted, which is different, because it's like you want you want the way the character sounds to be right, you know, and you don't ever want to have to go back because the audio quality that you're working with is terrible. So it was funny because Max out there he's got the microphone that I use right now. His is even better than mine, but it's just a simple Zoom mic. I think I bought it off eBay for like $150, where before I was trying, because as you know, a lot of this stuff are personal passion projects, to where it's like you have no idea if anybody's going to listen to this thing. So it's like you're always looking at your investment over, you know, over how much you want it to be done right. And if you're interested in doing a podcast, like I said, I would either look for a studio, something like What Cheer in Providence. They have a studio there. There's other places that might start renting them out, I'm not sure. But if you're going to be doing it in your own home, I would definitely recommend it. First off, start with a really good microphone. And then, what is the Apple? The Apple editing software. GarageBand.
Either
GarageBand. Yeah, so
or
GarageBand is really good. And then,
Logic as well.
yeah, so I use Audacity, which is a free program, so sometimes it crashes. So, but it works pretty good for me. And like I said, it's the same thing as any other file. You just make sure you save it every time, because that does suck when you've made a bunch of changes. You know, and it's always a learning curve, but Audacity is a really good free program if you just want to get your feet wet.
Rob, what about you? Other apps that you rely on or occasionally use?
Okay, well, I mean, besides Word and Scrivener, as for publishing right now, I've been using Vellum on the Mac, and it's Mac only for now anyway. But Scrivener does the same thing Vellum does, but Scrivener has a much higher learning curve to it, like a 90-degree angle, for no reason whatsoever. And so Vellum is a lot easier to just import the Word document and then publish it out to an EPUB or to EPUB or a Mobi file. But there are a lot of other applications like Atticus, and there are other applications that I'm not naming because I'm not familiar with them, that will do the same thing that Scrivener does or the same thing Vellum does. It all comes back to, okay, is it a monthly fee? Is it an annual fee? How easy is it for you to go in and change stuff? So even though, you know, I've been harping on Word, Scrivener, and Vellum, those are really the three, the three applications I would probably recommend in case if anyone is decided to, say, self-publish their own book, then I would probably say Word or Vellum, Word or Scrivener. Word has an annual fee, and Scrivener is just a one-time charge fee for now. So in case if anyone's worried about a monthly fee starting to rack up.
Okay, cool. I've got a couple more questions, but I want to open it up to questions from the floor. Is there anything that anybody's wondering? Yes.
Actually, you talk about Word and Scrivener. I'm just starting to write stuff, and I'm writing it in Google. Is that, valid?
It's definitely valid. I mean, the thing, so, I don't know. Like I said, Word was like the first one that was like that, and I feel like Google is basically, whatever Microsoft is putting into Word, Google basically just says, we'll do that, but so I'm just more comfortable with Word. I think, like my daughter, it's like Google, and then you automatically have that accessibility that they were talking about, because it's Google. So you go to work, sign in, you got Google Docs right there. It's your files that you put on there.
So if you get Scrivener, you could save that to the cloud, though? Is Scrivener like a monthly fee?
No, actually,
purchase.
Yes, so what happens is Scrivener is a one-time charge, for now anyway. And what happens is that, yes, you can save it to the cloud if you want to. As for you accessing it from a different location that doesn't have Scrivener, to my knowledge right now, it's not possible. So with you using Google Docs, that's perfectly fine. What I was going to say is that any sort of application you find that your workflow works, so being able to access Google Docs from anywhere is great, because you can just open up Google Drive, sign into it, and start typing away. And it saves itself automatically. It's great. What will happen is once you finish it, and you have two things, writing and publishing. So what happens is the writing part of it, it's great. You can keep on using Google Drive until the cows come home. What happens is when you take that jump from writing to publishing, what will happen is that any sort of editor you send stuff to is going to ask for a Word document, and so at that point, then they're going to turn on track changes and start underlining every single little thing that you've done, and you're going to have an entire page worth of just scribblies.
So you get Word on Mac, can you get Word on Mac?
Oh yeah. Word. Microsoft Office is available on Mac, on PC, Linux maybe too. But yeah, you can get Word on Mac. But like I said, I would keep on using Google Drive up until when you're ready to publish, and then drag and drop everything, copy and paste everything into Word. If you're going to do all the editing and formatting yourself, then it's either Scrivener or Vellum or Atticus for the Mac. As for PCs, probably Scrivener would probably be the best thing to do because at least it formats it properly. There are probably other applications for PC. I don't know them, so I'm not going to say anything about that. But like I said, ease of use, and as long as you can log into Google Drive anywhere, which you can, then I would say keep on using it up until you're ready to publish, and then you'll have to then go through. Now, as for, you can also use OpenOffice as well. OpenOffice is free, and it can also save as a doc file or docx file as well. As long as you can save it like that, and if you're going to send it to an editor or to the editor, then the editor's going to ask for a Word doc anyway. And then once they send it back to you, as for publishing it, then then you're on your own about figuring what application you want to use, or you can go through somebody else instead. No vanity presses, just stay away from them. But and as for if you're going to do it yourself, then there are applications out there that thankfully make it really easy right now. Instead of going, say, InDesign. InDesign is used by all the big companies right now, where they drop all the Word document in there and make sure everything looks nice and flow properly. And InDesign is part of Adobe, so that means you're paying a monthly or annual fee for that, depending on how you play it. So.
You said track changes a couple of hard.
Oh God, track changes kids are a wonderful thing.
So if you decide to go the self-publishing route, or even if you go the traditional route, you get the document back, and there's all of a sudden your document looks completely different because there's all these little red marks and these little notes on the side of it that you have to go through and make them go away by fixing the thing that the editor hated. So, which is a whole process in and of itself.
And just remember, it's 120 to 140,000 Word document. It's going to go on forever, and you're just going to have to get used to it. Just yes, no, and then make sure you ask the editor whether or not it's one pass or two passes. If it's two passes, that's great. Then you have to do it all over again. But at least you answered her.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I would recommend then, if you are going to be doing second passes and those changes, save a new version, and make the changes in Rev 2 or Rev 3. Don't go back and rework your existing doc, because you might say, oh man, there was a thing in there that I wanted, and it's gone. So most, certain programs will allow you to snapshot. Others you just need to save as new, or save a copy with a new, with a version number or something like that.
For Scrivener for their little sidebar to give you an idea to go off what you just said. I had I had 4 versions of Weaver in one document in Scrivener because of the little sidebar, and you can, like I said, drag and drop chapters wherever you want, which is glorious. And so I had like 4 different revisions of Weaver in one document, and then from there I just copy and paste it or export it back into Word, and then send it off to the editor from there. So like he said, or if you're going to use something else besides Scrivener, like he said, create a new folder that says 2nd revision, 3rd revision, 4th revision, 5th revision. Make sure your file hierarchy is spot on, because if for some reason you save it with the wrong file name or something like that, and all of a sudden it deletes itself, or you can't find it because it ate it, you want to stay away from bad. You want to stay away from like bad file names, things like that.
I am a cautionary tale.
Other questions?
You guys use any writing analysis software?
You're talking about like Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid,
Well,
or
Grammarly is one, and then I have used more advanced, very much more advanced fiction writing analysis software called Autocrit.
I haven't used Autocrit. I've used Grammarly, but only in the corporate environment. I don't use it for my fiction because, when you've got, like in a fantasy world where you've got all sorts of made up words, it starts to just like have a nervous breakdown. So I haven't used it for my own personal writing. I do use it in the corporate environment.
Yeah, as for the applications you mentioned, beyond seeing the Grammarly ads, that's really as far as I've gone with anything like that. So I really haven't gone that far with it.
I run the Grammarly the whole time. And I mean, like, you know, my science fiction books definitely, but once you add it to it, like, there's a way to make it to where your magical words or the made up stuff is in there, so it's not too bad for that. But then there's also points to where they're like, that's not grammatically correct, but that's, especially within like dialogue, to where it's like, you know, yeah, that's what I want it to sound like, and it's like, but you can't make it sound that way. It's like, but that's what I want, you know. So you can chase your tail around a little bit with that. It hasn't. I feel like it's gotten smarter. Like it's actually. I feel like Grammarly has gotten better to where it's not as frustrating as it was when they first came out with it. So.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to do a 120,000 word book with Grammarly though. That would just, I mean, chapter by chapter, that would just, knowing how many things pop up when I'm just doing like a 3-page speech for our CEO or something.
I'm in the editing stage right now, so that's why I don't mind it so much. But I think for a first draft, I would have to shut it off.
Right.
Skynet is thinking.
What about for plotting or story and character bibles? Do you guys use any particular tools for that, or is it just like text docs that have character information in it?
Oh, because I pants, no. I should though, but yeah. As for character Bibles, I've done a Bible here and there. Thankfully, I grabbed the Voyager Bible back when it was on eBay years ago. It's like 12 pages, and that's it. It's like, this is not a Bible. It's only 12 pages. But as for character, I do have folders for either photos of actors or actresses saying, okay, I want the character to look something like this, and then make sure that with Scrivener, there is actually a character creator, which is great too, because it gives you all sorts of questions you have to answer, or at least fill in the blanks here, because you probably haven't done it yet. And so you can drag and drop little pictures of actors and actresses in there, and then give them names and all sorts of details, which is probably the great thing to do as long as you use it. And if you just pants your way out of it, then you're just digging yourself a hole.
So I do just use the Word doc. So the two types of books that I write, like I said, the first one's a pirate book, and there was a lot of historical research in it, like a ton of it. And it's funny because like when you're working on the first draft of a book, you turn yourself into an expert on the subject. Like the one that I'm working on right now, the edit that I keep referring to, is set in Paris, and it has a lot to do with art, and it has a lot to do with World War II. And now I'm setting the current story in the 90s, so now I'm deep diving into my own adolescence and some of the bands I saw back then, because that's where the character is. And then like she's a comic book nerd, so now I'm looking up like the comic books from specific eras, and it's like I kind of remember that storyline, so I have to keep track of a lot of that stuff. So that's all in different Word files as well, because you don't want to come across anything that's going to set somebody off. They're going to be like, no, that's not. I mean, I've gone so far down the rabbit hole to where like I have the day of the week. I've researched the day of the week that this story was supposedly taking place on, so that I know the historical events for that specific day. Now, when I started writing the science fiction stuff, after finishing the historical stuff, I said, oh, thank God, I don't have to do as much research, and I was wrong. So I'm a big fan of the series The Expanse, and I like ships to move the way ships are supposed to move. I love Star Trek, I love Star Wars, but nothing flies like that. And within The Expanse, you have to deal with G-force, you have to deal with the way you get around planets. So you have not to give away the second book of my science fiction series, but it's a number of moons orbiting a single gas giant. The gas giant is about twice the size of Jupiter. I tried doing the math for the movement of these planets, and I'm just like, if somebody wants to do it for me, feel free. But it's like, as I'm trying to figure out how long a day is on this one, or what the temperature would be on that one. So these are all things that I bought myself a headache, and it's like, but it's important to me to try and at least make the effort, because I think as a reader, you appreciate that. Like when somebody picks up your book and they see that you really tried to hit these things, and you weren't just making it up, There's things that, and I think that's why I love science fiction, is because, and this is the big difference between science fiction and fantasy, not that I'm crapping on fantasy, but you can you have your magic systems and you have to stay inside your magic systems. But within science fiction, you don't have a magic system. You've got reality and science. And someday they'll go, like, if you read the classics of science fiction, you go back and you go, this is all wrong. But it's like they still tried to stay within those contours of what reality was at the time, what we knew scientifically at the time. And I enjoy that challenge, that part of the writing. I try not to let it overtake what I'm trying to do with the characters, because those are obviously more important to me. But so when we talk about Bible, and we talk about, so I have multiple Bibles. I have character Bibles. I have the way things move in space. I have like an 8-page document just on combat, on the way the ships move, and the type of weapons that they would use, and then like I deep dove into future tech weapons. To try and see what would be the next stage, next evolution of what they would actually be using in combat. It's, it's scary stuff, but it's like, so I have to keep track of all that stuff in different files, and I may not pull them out for a while, to where it's like, the way that I define combat in the first book still needs to be consistent through all the way to the 7th. There can't be sudden changes, so. Keeping all that stuff, I imagine Scribners would probably make my life a lot easier.
What about other tools? I don't know if anybody, has anyone in the audience ever heard of like Plotter or Aeon Timeline?
Aeon Timeline I've used.
Okay, yeah. So those are both tools that are, Plotter is a little bit more basic compared to Aeon Timeline, in terms of being able to sort of map out scenes, map out story beats by chapter, by character. You can see how they line up. It's got some character and story Bible functionality, and Aeon Timeline is much more involved, where if you wanted to create a unique calendaring system, you could actually do that. It doesn't have to be the traditional 12-month calendar, things like that. But that way, I found that when I'm looking at a mystery, trying to remember who's where, because I need to make sure that they can't be in the wrong place at the wrong time if I'm trying to set them up as a possible suspect. I've found that that's something that's worked for me. Try using it, Bob?
Yeah, I've used Timeline because in Weaver there are certain stuff happens in the book where it's like, okay, this person's over here, and they have to go from point A to point B to point C, and then making sure in the book anyway that I've given them enough time, or at least know where they're going to be in case if for some reason I go back and do like a point 5 book or something like that with characters. But yeah, Timeline is really good. So in case, if for some reason you're doing a mystery where you need to know where everyone is in Clue or something like that, or at least where everyone is in a different room, and you can say, okay, between 5 and 6, this happened. 7 to 10, it's this, and it's all nice long timeline. Where instead of you getting out the string and the wall and then making the whole crazy conspiracy theory wall there, Timeline helps a lot because at least it keeps it all in one document, and it's all nice, and you can zoom in, and it's all color coded too, and so it helps a lot, and at least it'll get rid of any sort of additional strenuous documents that you may have.
What's it called again?
Eon. It's called Eon.
AEON
Timeline. Yeah, I think it's up to number 2 by now, or maybe number 3. But yeah, it's good. It's worth the money. I think it's a one-time charge. It's not a monthly or annual charge to my knowledge.
Other questions? All in back.
So kind of like outside of the tools a little bit, like outside of laptop and iPad and things like that, do you guys have any sort of kind of setup you like to do, or any sort of location you like to be when you are writing, or are you kind of more just free flowing wherever you are?
I used to carry around a lot of moleskin notebooks, and then I started getting smaller and smaller until I can't read my own handwriting anymore. But as for generally, it's either the library or I go to a coffee shop to write with a laptop. But generally, if for some reason I can't break out the iPad or laptop to type stuff out, I've got at least a couple completely empty. I'd say maybe a half dozen that are still completely empty and like haven't been touched yet because I just either oh, this looks fun, I'll buy this, and I haven't touched it since because the other thing too is that my handwriting is atrocious, and so I can type faster than I can write. But I've got a couple Moleskine notebooks that could easily be used, and it's probably there's also a Moleskine app now as well. So in case anyone is actually Moleskine came out with a digital pen as well as some sort of not exactly an iPad, but some sort of thing where you can write it and it'll save it to the application. So you can start writing it and it'll save it to the Moleskine application. So that's cloud-based, I'm assuming.
So for me, I'm dyslexic, so typing is essential. Handwriting does not work for me whatsoever. If I do, you won't be able to figure out what it says, neither will I. So the way it was explained to me when I was about 12 is that by typing and actually learning to type the correct way, I'm using both sides of my brain. So it makes it easier. So I have to have a laptop. I can't handwrite anything. It's terribly painful. And I definitely am like an old dog that circles his spot. And I've got a spot in the house where I like to write. And it just, I can write in other places if I have to, but that's definitely the location I like. And so the first book, The Curse of Purgatory Code, when I was writing that, my wife was a travel nurse at the time, which gave me a little time to work on it when we were traveling out west. And every time we'd go to a new apartment, it was like, you're like, that's not the right spot. That's not the right spot. And eventually I would settle in and find the right spot to write. But it always took me a little while to just get comfortable. That's where you find the groove.
Yeah, I'm a library, coffee shop, AirPods with the noise cancellation and maybe a little bit of music, but no lyrics type of thing playing. But I can't write. Last year I actually tried buying one of those Remarkable tablets because I thought, oh, that's cool. That way I don't have to keep buying notebooks. And it was just, it just didn't work with my handwriting. And I just realized I'm too slow if I'm writing by hand. I gotta be able to type.
So for me, just to add on, the odd thing is that it's certain coffee shops work out really well. Certain coffee shops, I'll just be on YouTube for the next 3 hours, and that's really about it. It's like finding, and the weird thing is, it's like I've been to certain coffee shops, like okay, this will work. And going off what he said about music, I'm a movie soundtrack freak. I've got 5 days worth of like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, stuff like that, and it's all in a folder where it's like and I've got like there's 3 hours worth of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo background music that is just, and it's not hummable. It's not as good as Star Wars is, but it's just 3 hours worth of music, nonsensical music that I've gotten used to writing to, and it's like after 3 hours, like okay, switch to another track. Oh, I've been here for 3 hours. It's time to go. But yeah, going to certain coffee shops, like yeah, this works, and going to other coffee shops, like nope, gotta go somewhere else, and it's kind of just weird.
When I first found out that I was going to be moderating the panel, I was thinking that we might have a video screen or something, and I had seen a picture that someone posted, and I know we keep coming back to Scrivener, but it was on a user group, and it was like, this is my setup, and it's 4 27-inch monitors, where he's writing on one, he's got like the notebooks on another, he's got research here, he's got some, and I'm like, oh my God, it's like your electric bill must just be monstrous, so I mean, some people do that, other people they want to be able to sit down and they just do the whole first draft, just pen and paper, and they do it in their living rooms, so, yeah, you had a question, right?
Me? Yeah, I did. So, I've heard, I wrote a short story, right? And I actually read it to my dad, but I was wondering where, is there a place where you'd be able to publish short stories, and just have other people look at them?
Okay, so to give you an idea regarding short stories and getting feedback for them, and I'll hit the publishing part in a second, but as for, there are writing groups in the state of Rhode Island and Massachusetts and Connecticut that as long as you join them, then at that point, then they may have a wait list to then at that point submit your work to them, and then at that point you can get some complete stranger to tear your stuff apart. And this is good to do because what happens is, as a writer and soon-to-be author, you have to get really thick skin really fast. And so having a complete stranger saying that your glorious short story is, not so great because of the following stuff, and they just tear into you. There are writing groups, you can find them, there's a website called meetup.com. And you look it up by your zip code actually, and say writing group or writers or something like that. The reason why I bring all this up is because for the last 10 years I've been running Rotary writing group out of the Work Public Library. So that's an option, along with, like I said, if you go over to meetup.com and just type in your zip code and the group you're looking for, you'd be surprised at how fast the groups come up. And a lot of times it's actually really good to get feedback from people, because then if you do, like I said, to jump from writing to publishing is a big jump. And so if you decide to say, okay, I'm really going to do this, I'm going to really want to get this done, and you get feedback from people and you fix it, which is great. And then from there, to publish it, you then have to figure out, okay, what short story area can I send this to submit? And submission process for many of these short stories is going to take months. Because once you send it to them, it's like, okay, and then you just start counting down the months. Now sometimes it's short, sometimes it's short, and sometimes it's long. But as for getting it published, a lot of people will send it out to a lot of different short story places to see whether or not they're accepting. Yeah, I would probably say look into a writing group and to start getting feedback. And if you do that, and if you do go that far with it, then make sure you either record everything or to write everything down about what they're saying about changing stuff on it, because a lot of times it really helps. And sometimes you're like, okay, that's a lot of times people will say a lot of stuff that you want to keep it, but some people say no. So, but,
I have to answer, she's my kid.
the person is not a plant.
No, I mean, like you said, there are meetup groups, obviously, and then you can ask your old man every once in a while too. That's an option.
Never go with your family. Never go with your family.
Oh, she knows I'm brutal. She knows I'm brutal. Are you kidding?
There are also, online. I mean, there's a lot of times contests.
Mm-hmm.
If you're interested, in, to submit, and then if they'll publish, or if you give feedback, and done some things. But well done on writing the short story. That's great. So it's a great start.
Yeah, as long as you finish it, the first step is finishing it first.
Yes.
So finish the short story, finish the novel, just get it done. And then once you get it done, either take a step back and take a month off, or say, okay, I'm going to jump right back into it and start editing. But as long as you get it done, which is really the big thing.
Yes.
Hi. I would love to hear all of your journeys with marketing, once you do have an established timeline for publishing, whether it's traditional, self-publishing. Did you use any specific tools? And even if you didn't, what works the best for you?
So for me, I'm self-published. I did try the traditional route with the first book, The Curse of Purgatory Cove, and as I was saying to Chris before the thing, I got close with a few agents, and it's really, there's a process to it, where you go and you query and you talk to them, and you get a lot of light brush-offs, right out the gate, it's like a form letter, and that's upsetting. But what is even more upsetting is when you get close and then they break your heart at the end. So I chose to bring The Curse of Purgatory Cove out myself, and I was very happy. It was hard to market so I went through Stillwater. So which is the place in Pawtucket. Steve is actually right next door if you want to talk to him about that. But one of the things about going through Stillwater, and I'm not dissuading anybody from going there, is you're not on the back end of it, to where when you put your work up on Amazon and you open up the Amazon ads on it, now you have control over that, which is bidding on different keywords. There's a whole element of it. So when I brought out my science fiction series, there was one day. Now the first book in that series goes out for free. You can get a free digital download. And there was one day where I was a bestseller for a day in young adult science fiction. It downloaded 2,000 times a day, And for the first 3 months that it was out, it was getting downloaded probably 200-300 times a day. So it was doing very well. Now, the second one in the series is probably, I've in the life of the book, not that the life of the book is over, but while I had the Amazon ads on, it was probably selling a book maybe every 3 days. So that was people that were actually paying money for it. Because the first one was going out for free, so now as people flowed towards the next one, but at the same time, I was probably spending more than I was making which is something important to think about. And that's one of the reasons why I'm working on a series, is because, so say the first book got downloaded 10,000 times by the time it's all said and done. The number of people that downloaded it for free, and now it's sitting on their Kindle and they forgot that it's even there. There's a lot of those. Now you have the people that actually read it, but they want to, like, you kind of like, how like casinos refer to like the people that spend a lot of money as whales. You want that reader that's going to pick up your first book, jump to the second book, jump to the third book, jump to the fourth book. But at the same time, you've got to produce that stuff. And, so the first science fiction book, I think, was just shy of 70,000 words. The second one was about 100,000 words. This third one right now is sitting at 130,000 words. So they're getting longer, And not that I'm modeling after Harry Potter, but there's definitely, the books are getting darker and the books are getting longer because there's just more characters, there's more plot, there's more things that I have to hit. So they're just going to take me longer to write. So I'm hoping at some point that the investment in time, once I crest that wave to where there's enough of them out there, to where you have people that can pick up the first book, and they can go to the second, they go to the third, they go to the fourth. But there's also that element. So that's my marketing strategy, right? And it's working. It is working. It's working very slowly, but it is working. But at the same time, as an artist, there's things that you want to do too. So like when I talk about that Paris book, that book is just something that I loved. I wrote it. I loved it. I just read it again. It's like, I just want it out there. I love the character. I love everything about that story. It needs work before I put it back out in the world, but it has nothing to do with the science fiction book whatsoever. It's like, so somebody that's like, I like science fiction, because that's the other thing, like right now with Amazon, you get so specific about what you want to read, that sometimes people will ignore something that's a little outside of the thing. But I mean, honestly, some of the best books I've ever read are books that I didn't expect to like, So as a writer and an artist, I have to be able to create stuff for me too. And I always say that. It's like, when you write something, you really want to write the thing you love. Because if you try to write to market, there's so much advice out there on the internet about writing to market. It's like trying to find that niche. But if you don't like it, by the number of times you're done reading that book, by the time you put it out there, it goes through your editor and you do another edit. If you don't like that book, you're really going to freaking hate it when you're done. Because it's like, it's your art, I mean, not to be all fruity-tooty about it, but it is. You have to, if it's for you, but you'll find you'll find those readers out there, hopefully. You'll find them out there if you really care about it. There's other people like you out there that are going to like the same stuff that you do. It's tricky to try and find that audience. And like, I'm not any good at the social media stuff. I try a little bit. And I probably will start turning that stuff back on once that third book is out to try and push people towards it. But the little bit of success I've had, I'm grateful for. But sometimes the best part of being a writer is when like somebody comes up to you that read your book, and it's like, it's that one sale, that one person that really enjoyed it, that's a complete stranger to you, that comes up to you. Like, so the podcast that I did, the Children's Story Podcast, that on average each episode was getting about 500 to 600 downloads. So that's pretty good. I was happy with that. But the best part for me was there's a woman in Chicago that does that teaches her kids at home. She does what do you call it?
Homeschool?
Homeschool. Thank you. Long day. But she homeschools her kids, and they use that as part of their education. They're listening to my stories. And then I got contacted by a teacher in Texas that's doing it with her classroom, and I'm like, yeah, financial gain. I get nothing for the podcast, but at the same time, The Curse of Purgatory Code, the first book, The Woman in Chicago, that probably like 25 copies got sold out there within her group of people that teach that. So it's a weird way to market, but it works.
So to give you an idea with Weaver, I started writing in 2010 when I said, okay, I want to sit my butt down and get something published for a change, or at least finish something. And then 8 years later, I finally got it done. I had been part of ARIA for about 5 years at that point. And so even though I didn't have a book out, I was learning what other people had done. And I figured out that, okay, I didn't want to do the agent route. I didn't want to do the whole, the whole windmill route. So I decided to do self-publishing instead, and so I did everything. I learned what other people had done, and the good news is that I went online and I found out what applications to use. I found Vellum by that time. I had already been using Scrivener already anyway. And so what happened is I found a cover image, which was pre-made, which helped a lot. And so found that, found Vistaprint to do the banner and things like that, and pressed the publish button Memorial Day weekend of 2018, which is probably not the bestest thing to do because everyone was on vacation at the time. But once I had it done, and once I had the book in hand, then I said, okay, I'm gonna do, you know, number 2, which, you know, as you can see, number 1 is still here, number 2 is nowhere to be found yet. I found out that I'm a very slow writer, and so I'm working on the series. I just haven't gotten, you know, to the end of it yet. I did use Amazon ads, which worked. I used Facebook ads, which worked. There were a couple months there where I was selling the ebook on Barnes & Noble and made a lot more back than I did on Amazon for a month. So I decided to go wide. I uploaded it to Apple, and then I uploaded it to Amazon, uploaded it to Barnes & Noble, uploaded it to Kobo, and then anyone else that, everything else from there was done through Graphic Digital. Which is an aggregator, which really helps a lot to get it into other places that are available. And I just, you know, kind of been learning. Sometimes, you know, stuff works out. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there are months where the ebook doesn't sell at all. Sometimes the paperback doesn't sell for months. And so I don't have a second book out yet. So anything that, I mean, right now the ebook is 99 cents online right now. The paperback is 20 and the hardcover is 30. And so right now I went through Ingram Spark as well because I want to be able to make sure I can get it out to everybody. So to give you an idea, my cousin in Florida ordered it at Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble, you know, at that time went through Ingram Spark, bought it, then it got dropped off at Barnes & Noble, and she got it from there. So as for going wide or going through, you know, Kindle Unlimited, I decided to go wide with everything. I think so far it's working. As for the audio stuff, I want to get into audio, but I just haven't been able to do anything with it. But so it's been enjoyable. I just need to get, you know, the rest of the books out.
Yeah, a friend of mine, she just self-published a book called Life Cycling, and she's just brilliant at marketing. And one of the things that she's doing is meeting with, you know, talking to people in like holistic health, you know, organizations. So there's a lot of word of mouth, you know, where she's then getting orders for like 25 at a time because they want to be able to give them to members. And she actually recorded the audiobook herself. You know, she made arrangements to have access to, you know, which is now up, you know, on Audible, and you know, there's lots of different ways that you can do it. But certainly the word of mouth, I think, you know, trying to get into, you know, book groups, Goodreads, you know, a lot of places like that sort of build up the networking. We're just about at the end of the time. We have time for one more quick question, if there is anything. No? All right. Well, with that, thank you all very much for coming. If you have not had a chance to stop by some of the offer tables, please do. Thank you very much to Rob and Pete.
And just to let everyone know, I'm over at table 17. Pete, where are you again? You're at like 1 something.
I'm right on the corner.
Yeah, right on the corner.
Down that way. There's a picture of the pirate boat.
Yeah, please make sure you stop by the tables. But thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you guys.
Thank you very much.